What's up, guys? Welcome back to the Alaska Outdoor Podcast. As always, I'm your host, Caleb Martin, and this show is brought to you by Explore Alaska. If you want to check out more of our episodes, go to explorealaska.com or check us out on any of your podcast listening apps, iTunes or SoundCloud or Spotify or any of those. Today, I'm joined by uh, Ronn Hemstock from Seward, Alaska, who's been a longtime teacher down in that area and private pilot apparently, and we're going to just talk a little bit about his experience from 2016. Ron, how's it going, sir?
Going well. Thank you for having me on.
Yeah, no problem. Appreciate you joining us. So before we go too much into your story, can you give us a little background on where you're from and what brought you to Alaska originally?
Oh, it's kind of a long story, really. I was born in Seattle to my mom and dad when he was in the military, and they moved to Los Angeles to work in the aerospace industry when I was an infant. So I was raised in LA, but I would go home to Minnesota and visit my grandmother, who had, I guess effectively it would have been her brother-in-law, who was my acting grandfather. I didn't have one. And he used to tell me stories about the wilderness. He had gone up into Canada, up into the Athabasca region back in the early 1900s, and he would tell me all the stories, and it got me hooked on wanting to get out and be in the wild. So when I got out of high school, I just kind of started my way north via Minnesota and Idaho, and ended up in Alaska, and just kind of finished up here. That's what kind of brought me up anyway.
Yeah, I've been all over the U.S., and it's amazing how Alaska always seems to call me back every time. It's hard to get this much public land and room to roam around anywhere else in the U.S.
Yeah, you get down to Arizona, it reminds me a lot of, it's very arid, but it reminds me a lot of Alaska, in that you drive out of town and you've got 100 miles of road and not see a house. It's a lot like it is here, but it's just not the same terrain. But yeah, great up here.
So, kind of circling to the 2016 story, part of it is the fact that you have a plane there at the airport in Seward. I imagine you've been a pilot for quite a while, huh?
Yeah. I dreamt of being a pilot since I watched my dad solo when I was about 7. So when I got up here and took my first job out in Naknek, I took my summer earnings that year and bought an airplane and had some locals teach me to fly it. And flew it for a while, got my license. So I've been flying for 27 years, I guess.
Got a few hours underneath the belt, I'm sure.
Yeah, just living in Alaska without a plane is kind of an odd thought to me. I get out and about quite a bit. There's a lot of little places even here to get up to the mountains and play on the strips, but get into the flatter lands like out west, and you can land just about anywhere.
Yeah, it seems like they're the perfect little plane to get into the backcountry. I don't have a plane personally, but I'm pretty jealous of a lot of my buddies who have their pilot's license and planes, and I just need to kick my butt into gear and get after it. Man, it just opens up a whole new world of opportunity, it seems like.
Well, everybody thinks it's really cost prohibitive, but all hobbies are expensive. My wife drinks coffee at $5 a day. That adds up pretty fast, But my kid has 2 snow machines at 13 grand a piece, and a snow machine trailer for 5. And well, I can own an airplane for that, and he can only play with them in the winter, and I can play year round. So, it all depends on what you want to put your money into. But it's not that bad an expense, really, when you think about what hobbies cost.
So with the airplane, are you a pretty avid hunter, fisherman, or is it just kind of a door to adventure in the backcountry, or what?
Well, I moved up here as an avid hunter. I went out a lot, did a lot of hunting. But 97, 98, somewhere in the late 90s, the wrestling season got moved from the spring to the fall. And I just retired for my first year not coaching wrestling here at Seward High School. So after 25 seasons, I cashed out. But the fall was in a gymnasium from that time on. I would start practice in September. I didn't end the season until Christmas break, and all my weekends were sleeping on gym floors. I haven't really been able to do any hunting for the last 25 years. So I hope to get back into it now.
I hope so too. To me personally, I don't know what I would do with myself if I couldn't be hunting in the fall. But I mean, I'm kind of a little bit of an exception on the amount of time I'm allowed to spend out there.
Yeah, it sounds like you're kind of lucky. Most
Yeah.
of us have that privilege, but I used to go fly out to Montague Island and land on the beach and hunt deer out there, and I hope to get back into that now because that's so close. And there was same day airborne out west for caribou. I'd go out there and hunt those. So I'm hoping to get out a little bit.
Yeah, we just went over to Montague and we were doing a little fishing this year. But I had a buddy that was talking about there's actually he's seen more bears on Montague than he actually did deer, which was kind of a strange occurrence for him. I think he saw 5 different brown bears and saw 2 deer. He wasn't there very long, obviously, but pretty strange for Montague.
Yeah, every time I've been there, I've seen a lot of bears. It's all over. But, it's the predator prey populations. They come and they go. So
Yeah, we were just having a discussion on that the other day because a lot of in the hunting community, you see a lot of people advocating for predator management and increased predators, and then we were talking a little bit about where that has worked and where they've actually been able to lax that management, and that's kind of a rare thing that you hear of. Most of the time, we're trying to manage those predators better, especially on areas like the Kenai and North Kenai, Game Unit 15A down there. It's been a tough fight for many years.
well, when I spoke to the biologist after my little encounter, um, I was told, and of course I would have to go look the data up. So this is purely an anecdotal story, but he told me that an unforeseen consequence of opening a bear hunting season on the Kenai was that there are now more brown bears than before because the boars typically will eat a lot of the cubs and bring the sow into estrus. But by the hunters taking the boars out, they've actually had a better survival rate of the cubs. So there are now more bears roaming the Kenai than they had before the hunting season started.
That's an interesting consequence and change in management. It'll be interesting with our new area biologist down here to see what his input is on that because I mean that is one thing that's gone round and round on the Kenai for many years about how to properly manage that population and what they're doing, if it's effective or not.
Well, and of course, when I first moved here, we had black bears everywhere. They were clawing the trees in my front yard. They were in my driveway. They were everywhere, kind of like pets. And now you hardly see a black bear. The brown bears have moved in. And this summer, I probably saw, I don't know, 8 or 10 different brown bears in town. And they had to shoot a couple of them. And a lot of them moved over the mountain with that big fire we had last summer that burned all that ground. A lot of them came east. And so the population of brown bears is up in Seward.
Yeah, it seems like a lot of places on the Kenai there are as well. I know, me personally, was back in April last year. I said on one bait stand that we were hunting and seeing 14 individual bears come in one night, which is pretty wild for one bait station. But being able to see the different features of the bears come in and be able to see that many bears in a probably 12-hour period overnight, it's pretty remarkable. But at the same time, it kind of gives us keys to the how that management's affecting that area. And I don't have the perfect answer, but it seems like there's definitely needs to be some changes there.
That certainly doesn't make you want to get out of the stand and walk out in the dark.
Definitely not. I heard, actually, I was reading one news article. It said a few weeks before your incident, I think they had to kill a problem bear or maybe a sow with cubs actually there in Seward. What was that, like 2 weeks, I think?
I think it was the week before I had my tussle. They actually had 4 bears killed. One of them was a collision with a car. A boar and a pickup got into it out about 7 miles out of town. And then a guy with, he has a lot of people living on his property, some trailers and whatnot, and a lot of people live there. And the bear came into his backyard and was aggressive, and he ended up having to take all 3 of them out. So there were 4 bears taken. I think it was a week, just a week before I ran into the one I ran into.
So it seems like this problem with bears has been escalating in Seward for quite a number of years. Not, it wasn't just kind of a one-off incident. That's for sure.
No, I don't think so. I think the population has been going up. We've got that weir out at Bear Lake, and there's always a lot of brown bears out there, and there's trails that go up into the lake, and there's bear sign all over everywhere up there. You see them all the time. Whereas 25 years ago, you didn't see very many brown bears. It was just the black bears you saw. It was just quite a different thing. I don't know. If they just don't get along, so they don't share territory. I'm not enough of a biologist to know why, but they had that thing what was it that killed all the bats? A white fungus thing that got a few. And they said that also affected the bears in their den. Some biologists told me that too, that a lot of the bears had to say it, like it warmed up enough that enough moisture got in that it caused a pneumonia issue in the young bear cubs, and they didn't survive the spring because of it. So the bear dropped.
That's interesting. I've never seen any disputes between those brown bears and black bears in that area, but I know I personally up on the resurrection area on two different incidents. I was up there hiking. I'd been up there hiking for a bunch of days, but you always see bear scat on all those trails in those areas. I mean, that's super common. And I'd been walking over this pile of bear scat for multiple days. And one day on the way back through, I happened to look down, and there was just a pile of claws sitting on top of this brown bear scat. And being the curious outdoorsman I am, I'm sitting there picking through it, and sure enough, there was I ended up getting 12 black bear claws out of a pile of scat from a brown bear on the resurrection.
Oh, one of them had eaten a black bear. Huh?
What's that?
One of the brown bears had eaten a black bear. Huh?
Yeah.
Well, I know that unfortunate soul from Sunrise this last summer that was killed by the brown bear. When they went in there and dispatched some bears, they discovered that black bear had also been feeding on the carcass. So some brown bears were in, and so were some black bears.
Oh yeah, and there's some of those areas I know I've hunted. I won't go into specifics for some of our people listening, but some of those areas I've hunted, I know I've seen up to 12 black bears a day. And up in the higher country where I like to spend a lot of time up there, this last summer was actually the first summer in quite a long time. I woke up and there was a brown bear about 150 yards outside the tent, just hanging out on the hillside first thing in the morning. It just got up and started stretching too. But it was interesting because I never even, bears are always out there and they're always on the move, and that's their house. We're guests most of the time in it, but it was kind of surprising to see, it was a fairly nice, probably a high 8-foot brown bear to see him up on the hillside that late in the summer and hadn't moved down yet.
Yeah, that is kind of unique. I fly around a lot in the spring and watch the bears dig out. I always find that to be enjoyable, fun, their dig outs and where they're coming out of. And the black bears always show up a lot sooner, eating the grass down low, and then the brown bears come out probably 3 weeks later, even most of them. And they're much, much higher, and they work their way down. It's kind of fun to watch. But late in the year like that, they're usually down feeding the salmon.
Oh, yeah. It was pretty interesting, nerve-wracking, and it definitely made me trust my dog a little bit more because he was kind of making some noise in the middle of the night, and, sometimes you had a long day on the trail, and you're kind of just telling the dog, like, hey, it's probably a squirrel or one of the million other things he chases all day long. And, that happened the one time I didn't listen to him, woke up the next day going, oh, man, maybe I should have been listening to him.
Exactly. It was a bit more, but
it's funny because a lot of the times, I rarely take my dog anywhere. Most of the time it's when Kendra's telling me I need to take him with to burn off some energy, so he'll mind a little better at the house. But you're kind of always like kind of guessing on what area I'm going to go, what I could potentially run into. When I'm packing in the high country, I'm always trying to walk with 2 trekking poles. So it's hard to keep him on a leash or keep him close enough to grab him when, in case, we do end up running into a bear or something on the trail.
Yeah, my dogs, they think they're tough until something looks mean at them. They chased a black bear off this summer when I was up Colorado Creek, way back in by that Seward Lake back in there, and there was a black bear up around the lake, and they chased off after it. And, I yelled till I'm hoarse in my voice, and eventually they decided they'd had enough and come back. But I'm sure if I turned around and looked at them, they'd come right back.
Yeah, it's funny. Our dogs are the same way. If somebody could walk by the fence and bark, 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 and you open the fence and they'll go up wagging their tail. Total softies, never happened.
Yeah.
So jumping into kind of the point of our podcast a little bit here. Can you kind of walk us through what happened? It was October, is that correct?
October 27th, actually. Yeah, so it was late in October. And my routine, and at that time I just had the one dog, my routine is to get up early, have a cup of coffee, read some headlines, and then at 6 o'clock I'm out the door with the dog, and we walk for about half an hour, and he does his duty, and I get back and get ready to go to work, and I'm work by 7. So it's kind of the routine. And because the airplane sits there on the corner of the strip, and it's a nice wide open area of ground, and I'm kind of doing a civil service to walk the runway and throw sticks off and this and that. I usually would just walk a big loop around the airport. And I've been doing that for years. And this particular morning, and it was dark as just inside of a closet, there was no moon, and it was kind of wet and cloudy, and I let the dog out and put on my rain gear and started walking, and I made it around the corner, and the dog had taken off into the grass in between the runways. He just kind of ran around all the time anyway. Yeah, this is before I put bears on. I now have bear bells I put on my dog, but he was just out doing his thing, and I was calling my brother. My daughter had just told me she was getting married, and I was all excited to tell him the story. Look, I'm going to have a wedding in the family, and the dog just came running between my feet. It was like he was shot out of a cannon, and he was a tail between his legs and hackles up and looking over his shoulder and just making for the other end of the runway. And I knew something was chasing him, and I just was hoping it was a moose, and I was wrong. I turned around and saw, and it was silhouetted, and the only light that was there is some parking lights over the airplanes, and it just this big fringe of the bear, and I could see he was probably, 20, 30 meters behind me, just coming in full steam, and I didn't have any time to do anything but kind of turn and scream like a little girl, and I was down, and he had me down. And picked me up, right shoulder here, got a hold of me and just shook me like a rag doll and slammed me into the ground a few times, and then let go and re-gripped and bit the hell out of my back and clawed my back up pretty good. Then rolled me over and started digging into my stomach, and that was when I decided I'd better fight back, because if I was going to die, I wasn't going to go down without a fight. So that's when I stuck my hands in his mouth, and he took my thumb off. And I rolled back over and laid there some more. And then I decided my screaming and whining was probably exacerbating the problem. So I shut up, and it subsided, and he jumped on my back a couple of times and broke a few ribs and dragged me off the runway and buried me with a little grass and wandered away.
Wow. What's your dog doing this whole time? Is he stick it out and hang out with you? Or
he stuck it out, but he stuck it out about 200 yards down the runway. I could see his eyes glowing from that light that was behind me. And he didn't want anything to do with it. He just sat way under the trees. I feel sorry for the poor guy, because he's really shell-shocked. It's been 4 years for me now, so I'm back to walking in the woods, and I forget my bear spray, and I don't think much about it, and I'm just back on my game almost. That first summer was really hard, but my dog is not. My dog is really, really, really affected by this. We'll go out walking, and a backfire will happen, or something loud, a gunshot off in the distance. and he'll start burrowing underneath a tree. He'll go into a culvert. I've had to wait half an hour for him to get out. I've had to carry him back out of the woods because he goes catatonic. He's really not doing well. I really feel
Sounds
sorry.
like one of our dogs. I have a dog that's an Australian Shepherd, and every time he hears a gunshot, I mean, on the first of the New Year that we just had, the fireworks going off, he was hiding in our bathtub for most of the evening.
Yeah, I have to get doggy downers for him. I took my dogs out of town to my daughter's house this last New Year's because at 4th of July, I mean, it was all I could do. I mean, they were freaking out so bad. It was horrible. So I thought, well, I'll just run them out of town where they can't hear the fireworks. So they slept out at my daughter's house for the night. But
So when the bear got to you and knocked you down, what's going through your head as it's kind of grabbing on your shoulders? It just kind of, a lot of people say, when they're in kind of a incident of got a lot of adrenaline going on, time kind of slows down. Is that what happened for you, or was it just kind of a rush?
well, you are amped up, instantaneously amped up. It's kind of like the same feeling you get when you're driving in your car and the wheels suddenly lose traction with the road and you just start to slide. You're instantly alert. So I was very alert, very heightened alert. And I was thinking very clearly. I was in a defensive mode. I knew I had to try and get through it. So I mean, I was just trying to play the game to the best of my knowledge. I was yelling into the phone to my brother, which is another kind of funny story. But, I was trying to focus on getting the message out that I may not be making it through this. And then I lost my phone. And then it was just trying to keep my head down and protect it with my arms and just get through it. But like when he rolled me over and he had his face digging into my belly, his head was right here. It was kind of strange because, it's a crystal clear thing. I wasn't afraid. You're just too active to be afraid. Fear all hit me after he left because then I thought he'd come back. Then I was terrified. But I remember thinking while I was pushing his face away with my thumbs in his mouth, he doesn't smell. I was just like, I smell bears when I walk through the woods. Everywhere I go, I can stink. Oh, bears have wandered by. They stink. But my brother has told me, he does a lot of studies in this stuff. He said that it's very common in the fight and flight syndrome that your olfactory nerve just shuts off because they don't want you to be thinking about anything except what keeps you alive. And that's not one of the ones you have to worry about. So the fact that his face was right here and I couldn't smell him was just, I'm sure, a factor that, well, my nose wasn't operating like it should work, And then I felt elated when he dragged me off the runway and started to bury me. Because I know a guy up north that had been attacked, and we had already had our discussion about his to do because it had happened the summer or two before that. And when a bear starts to bury you, and I've known this from reading books for years, well, that means they think they've got you down, they've got you incapacitated, and I'm going to come back when you're tender or dead. So I thought, great, I bought some time. So I was really happy. And he dragged me off the runway, and he dragged me back to my phone, and he left. And I was really like, wow, I'm going to live through this. And I just kind of got excited about that. And I made my phone call to my wife and called 911 so that my phone could get found by the GPS locator. And then he came back, and I could hear his claws on the pavement and walking next to the gravel. And I thought I was going for a second round, but he just kept going, wandered off. Then my dog came back, and I felt pretty good about it. I thought, well, if my dog's willing to sit next to me, the bear must not be anywhere nearby.
Yeah, they can be handy for telling you stuff sometimes that we don't know. Obviously, before it happened, and obviously after it happened when when the bear finally made its way off. But looking back at the situation and the whole thing, what do you think happened? I mean, the bear was just happened to be in the area, and and your dog kind of ran into him on the trail, or?
Well, I only saw one bear, and I didn't see him all that well because it was really, really dark. I saw the silhouette, and I saw his face, and that was about all I really saw, the inside of his mouth. But I'm pretty sure that it was the sow and cubs I had seen a week or two before walking around the airport. And they were yearling cubs, so they were probably what? By October, a 200-pound bear, not real big, I don't suppose. But I never saw the cubs. But I think what happened, my dog has a tendency to see other four-footed creatures as friends. And I imagine he probably spotted these creatures over there and thought, oh, look, more fun. And he ran over there, and Mama got pissed off and chased him back. And it just so happened that, he just kind of like a pick and roll in basketball. He ran right past me, and I was left there holding the bag, and she decided I would do as well as he did, and she just had her way with me. So I took measurements of the holes in my back from where the teeth had bitten me to a biologist, and we measured that. We measured skulls, and by the distance apart on the canine teeth, they determined that the bear was probably in the vicinity of 850, 900 pounds. And then when the DNA test came back from the biologist, he said that it was a sow that is a second generation bear in town. Its mother had been tagged here. And I think they said it was 7 years old.
Wow. Yeah, I imagine 900-pound bear knocking you over probably felt a lot like being hit by a freight train.
Yeah, well, I thought I was kind of tough. I wrestled a bear when I was 19 in a vaudeville act, that came to town. And I did my best to stick with him and took him down a time or two. But it was a trained wrestling bear. But I had a great time. And I thought for 40 years that, well, I'm going to be okay. If I ever see a bear, I'll get a lick or two in, and I'll be okay. And that went right out the window. And when that bear picked me up by my shoulder, and I wasn't nothing was touching the ground. I was completely in the air, and she just banged me into the pavement 2, 3, 4 times, busted up my face, and I was bleeding everywhere. It was really, really humbling how easily she had her way with me. So,
what kind of damage did she do to your shoulder? I know you mentioned you had a couple of broken ribs. What was the damage?
Well, the real damage to the right shoulder, I don't know if you can see it there. I can send you some pictures, but it took a big chunk out of the back of my arm. I lost one of my triceps. Took a big chunk out of my arm. But the one I actually had surgery on is my other shoulder, because either a tooth or a claw had gone right into the joint between the ball and the cup. So after a year and a half, I just couldn't lift my arm up anymore, so I had to go have that repaired. But the one that she actually chewed on, other than the fact that I lost a tricep, not much difference.
Then she grabbed you by the leg, drug you off the pavement into the grass?
Yeah, and it was really weird because by then I'd kind of just gone limp, and it was the most gentle thing after this big violent interaction and banging and clawing and this, all of that. And then when I was finally just kind of laying there figuring, well, this is all in, I guess, this is how I meet my end. She jumped on me a couple of times, broke a couple of ribs, and just kind of stood on me, breathed heavy a little bit, and decided, okay, I'm done. And then, as gentle as you might think a cat would pick up her kitten, she just grabbed me by the back of my thigh and just pulled me, but didn't bite me enough to even break the skin. Just enough to pull me off the runway to the grass and buried me up. And it was just, I was like, wow, after all of that violence, so gentle. She just pulled me off and did her thing. And then I thought, well, I could get up and walk back to my truck. But I was sitting kind of like second base, and I had to get to home plate. I had 2 directions I could go, but I didn't know which direction she had gone. And I didn't want to walk up into her again, so I decided I'm just going to stay right where I'm at, even if I have to wait till daylight, which would have been about 3.5 hours. But I wasn't figuring I was going to go anywhere because I didn't know where she had gone.
Yeah, I just from experience and talking with biologists myself, I think a lot of people, bears kind of have this reputation of being hunters and running down prey a lot of the times. And a lot of biologists think that they actually don't digest meat very well. So when they bury stuff, they do that because after they bury it and cover it in grass and stuff, then it can decompose a little bit, and then they'll come back later on after it decomposes because they digest basically rotten meat better than they do fresh red meat. I know during pink season you see them all over the place eating rotten stuff, and I know a lot of bear attacks later on they find the victim partially buried due to that same thing.
Well, yeah, and people are the same way. We cook our food to break down the proteins so that it's easier for us to digest them. You shoot a deer and you hang it in your garage for a couple of weeks to tenderize it. I mean, it's not a bad thing, but yeah, they don't tend to eat things that are alive. I just sent you some pictures there on your phone from the hospital, so you can see what it was that.
Oh wow, yeah. Yeah, it looks like definitely left you with a few stitches, that's for sure, huh?
Yeah, and then
Almost looks like buckshot.
Carhartt took care of me. They saw that picture of that coat and they sent me a new one. They were good to me.
Go Carhartt plug, everybody. Wear bear protection, Carhartt.
And absolutely, I truly believe that if I hadn't been bundled like I was, it would have been fatal. It was so cold out, and I got out of my nice cozy bed, and it was 26 degrees out. It was the first day we dropped below freezing, so I had a long sleeve runner shirt on, a couple of hoodies, and my Carhartt coat, and a wool hat. And I think if I hadn't been bundled up like that, it would have been an entirely different operation.
So after you mentioned during the event you were trying to use your phone, and then after she kind of walked off and you finally had the courage to get up, what happened next there?
Well, she dragged me back to my phone, and I wasn't really thinking about it, but she dragged me off and I just had my head down. And it got quiet, and I waited a good minute or so, and then I lifted my head to look around, and I could see the glow of the screen just a few feet off in front of me. So I plucked up my courage and snuck forward and dragged it underneath me. And my wife knew where I was walking the dog, so I called her first so that she could come on the way because she knew where I was. Then I called 911 because I was thinking very clearly, I want my phone located. So I called 911, which is actually answered in Soldotna, and I knew that. And when they answered the phone, I asked them to put me through to the local police force so that I could speak to the local police force, because I want to speak to people who know where I am. And then I just asked them, you got anybody, a garbage truck, a city, I don't care, any person with a car, could they please come out here? And so a guy named Morgan Woodard, our first responder, was our policeman. He showed up and stood over me holding his shotgun, and he told me later he couldn't see anything. He didn't know if the bear was there or not because he couldn't see 4 feet off the end of the barrel. It was just that black. And he drove past me when he got there. He couldn't see me. I was too dark. He drove right past me. I turned around and come back. But then the ambulance showed up. I don't know, must have been maybe, couldn't have been very long. From the time the police were there until the ambulance was there, maybe 5 minutes. And I just got up and got in the ambulance, laid down, and we drove off. It was pretty peaceful at that point, and I was a very happy guy.
I bet. Yeah, that's quite a relief to be, at least have the feeling of, 1 minute you're kind of worried about being literally eaten alive, and then the next minute, you're kind of shock, I imagine, is starting to kind of wear off. Your adrenaline's starting to wear off at that point. Were you in a massive amount of pain at that point, or were you still?
I wasn't any pain. Not any. The only thing that hurt was my thumb, and I hadn't taken my glove off because I really thought she had ripped the thumb out of the socket. I was convinced that when I took my glove off, my thumb was going to go with it. But as it turned out, it was just a big, huge laceration and a smashed up end and a broken bone. But my thumb hurt a little, but I was just so elated to have a second bite at the apple. All I could do was be happy. I'm just happy. And then of course they drugged me up with morphine or something at the hospital, and I wasn't feeling any pain for a while.
So now that, going after the incident, I imagine you spoke a little bit earlier about how your outlook change for a little bit, and your dog certainly has not gotten over it still. But um, do you do anything different now? Does it your opinion on bears change at all, or how you act in the outdoors? Does it change at all, or what do you kind of think of the situation? Was it kind of a one-off situation, wrong place, right time, or what's your viewpoint on that?
Well, I mean, intellectually speaking, I think that it was a one-off operation. I mean, I've been out, I can't tell you how many times. I've run into bears all over, never had any issues at all. And now I'm in town, and I mean, right here behind me, like I said, on this side, right here is the cruise dock, right behind it's the airport. I mean, I'm in town. And so it's just an odd thing to run into a bear in town. So it was an odd deal. But that first summer, it was really hard for me. Every time I would get out of the car and start walking in the woods, any little noise at all, I was hypersensitive and looking over my shoulder, and I couldn't relax and enjoy the walks in the woods. I forced myself to do it. I'd go out and walk my dogs 5-6 miles a day, but I was not enjoying my time in the woods because I was just concerned that at every moment, so hiding behind that tree, and it took me a couple of years to kind of get to where I don't do that anymore. And now I carry bear spray religiously, but I pretty much did then anyway. Although I don't think bear spray would have helped me. I don't think a hand grenade would have helped me. I didn't have any reaction time at all to do anything about it. So it wouldn't have done me any good in the condition I was happening to find myself in, But in most situations, and I work with a guy who's run into bears a few times, and he's had to fire his bear spray, and it's helped him out. If I'm just trying to keep a passive aggressive bear away, but if I don't see it coming, I don't see it coming. But I go out in the woods pretty much every day to walk my dogs, and I'm back to the point where I can enjoy my walks now, not think about it, look over my shoulder. But I feel bad for my dog because he's not. He gets freaked out and runs back to the car all the time. I have to leave him sometimes at the trailhead and go back out.
Got BVS and bear fear syndrome permanently.
And I don't remember the bear making noise. And that's another one of the things my brother says is well, your ears turn off, I don't remember the bear making, the type of noises. So I'm thinking, well, why do loud noises bother him? Because it's the loud noise that gets him. And maybe it's just all loud noises always did, but now he's just schizophrenic because he's been scared so badly. But the bear didn't make any loud noises that I ever heard, except I do remember vividly the exertion, like as it bit at my coat and ripped and tore. I could hear it putting effort in like it does when I have to pick up something heavy off the ground. I hear it grunt, but it wasn't roaring like you see in the movies. So, I could hear, but my brother says, man, you probably just didn't hear right. I don't know. Can't say.
I know a lot of times I've seen bears that get even spooked or scared, or even, most of the time the aggressive ones that I've seen are normally popping their teeth. And, if they get spooked, it's typically they, especially when I walked up to them on Kodiak or bumped into a bear, in those salmon creeks where they're pretty popular, a lot of people are there fishing. Sometimes those bears will just kind of blow at them. You just kind of get a large exhale of air, like, just kind of let you know that they're there. But I mean, mid-attack, it's hard to say. I don't think I've ever personally been in that situation or seen a bear attacking something to know what it's supposed to sound like.
Yeah, I have no idea. I can just tell you it sounded like any other weightlifter or wrestler working hard on the mat. I've just, he was just grunting and working. But yeah, I don't know. The bears I've run into usually, you look at them and they look at you and and you just go your own way. Never had to fire my bear spray or pull my handgun or any of that. I've been pretty lucky, So I just kind of consider myself, I can look at it bad or good, but I consider myself to be lucky in that this encounter could have been so bad. Sometimes my wife goes with me. If she'd been there, she would have either witnessed that or she'd have been the one under the bear, and that's neither one of those are good outcomes. It could have been warmer and I wore less clothing. I mean, there's all sorts of, I could have not had my phone with me, often didn't, you know, but I consider myself just like the perfect storm of luck. I just came through it smelling like a rose.
So what was the kind of time between, you said you didn't have any time to react. What was the kind of the time and distance, do you think, between the time that you saw the bear and recognized the fact that it was a bear and the time that it was on top of you?
Second and a half. I mean, I had my phone to my ear, and was facing this way, and my bear was behind me. And the dog ran that way, and I looked over my shoulder and saw the bear and had just enough time to return to the forward position and take half a stride. I lifted 1 foot to start to run, knew better, but I did anyway. And I was down. She just tackled me to the ground and then picked me back up and shook me. I had maybe a second and a half. So I would have had no time to try and get bear spray out or pull a revolver out or help pull the pin on a hand grenade. I had no time to do anything. And so I don't think it would have helped me much, but it would have made me feel a whole lot more comfortable after the attack ended and the bear moved away. Then if I'd had something like bear spray, I would have felt a little bit more protected because I could have had something in my fingers while I sat there terrified waiting for help. You know, I don't think it would have made a difference for me, that's all. You know, some people.
I know recently in Kodiak, I think it was 72-year-old that was trail running on one of the trails up there, and I can't remember if he had headphones on or not, but I think he just happened to spook one or kind of engage that primal instinct of the bear when he was just running on the trail, and he had no idea the bear was even there. He was just running down the trail, and the bear came up behind him, same thing, just knocked him to the ground. And I think the bear just bit him a couple times and then made its way off. But he said the same thing, like he carries bear spray and everything, and he said he had his bear spray in case it came back and never did. But he was just running down the trail, not a care in the world. All of a sudden, bam, in the middle of a bear attack. So it kind of speaks to the fact that anytime, anywhere, you know, you never know when that's going to happen, or, you know, we can kind of guess and be a little bit educated on bear behavior and know where they might hang out. But like you said, you know, you were never worried at the airport in the middle of town as far as bears go.
No, any more than I am when I walk out my front door. But I've seen bears go by. I just don't think of them being a problem. You know, it just isn't that big a deal. You know, once in a while you open the door and there is a bear. But it's just not anything that you think about. You know, I run a rental down here, and I had a guy stay at my house a couple summers ago that was doing that ultra marathon where they swim 5 miles in the bay and then they run, or no, they ride 120 miles to Girdwood and then they run 26 miles. You know, the big race.
Yeah, like AK Ironman or something.
Yeah,
I think it's cool.
This was I think the first or second running of it. Anyway, he happened to be staying at my house, and we were talking about the bear attack, and he was telling me that he was an attack survivor. But his encounter was an entirely different situation, totally different, in that he was out in Eagle River just running around, and it was funny too. He said the same kind of thing. It's how crystal clear his mind was. He came around the corner in a tall, grassy area, and these 3 bears stood up. You could see them from here as they kind of looked at him and his first thought was, "Oh, isn't that cool?" No, wait, that's not cool at all. And Mom took off after him, and he was right kind of on a steep trail. And he said he had just enough time to turn and start to jump. And the bear took a swat at him, and it laid him open pretty badly on his leg and his head. And he managed to tumble down the hill. And every time he'd roll over, he said he'd look up and see that the bear was still at the top of the hill and not following him. And he got to the bottom of the hill, and he jumped up and kind of threw his clothing around his leg to keep the blood from bleeding out. And he limped his way back on the trail until he had phone service and got a phone call in. And it took a couple of hours to get to him to rescue him out of there. And he'd lost enough blood. He was in the hospital for weeks. And he was only in close proximity to this bear for half a second. So his encounter was entirely different than mine. You know,
Oh yeah, I guess it would depend. I mean, obviously, highly on where the bear is and where you are and what kind of terrain you're in. And it's I think everybody knows that bears that are spooked or sows with cubs are typically the most dangerous bears there are. And that's a lot of the reason why I ended up getting that Garmin in reach more than anything. I like to hike and go out and some steep terrain often, but most of the time, it's pretty nice to have that insurance there that if something does happen, in his case, obviously in your case, you're in town, but having that inReach to be able to hit that SOS button when you need
Absolutely.
it and have people on the way.
Yeah, airplanes, back when I started flying 25 years ago, it was the ELT, and they changed that frequency now to a different frequency, and people still have ELTs, but it's really popular now in the aviation world, as you probably know, as much as you're out, that pilots now carry those inReachs and spots because you can link them to your computer, and nobody has to wonder where you are because your computer, they just turn on your account and they can see it's been plugging in every so minute. Yeah. Oh, look, it's been hitting this spot for the last 2 hours. That's where that device is sitting. And so people are, even the FAA has got a little link you can put your inReach information in so that the FAA can trigger your account and know instantly where you are if you hit that SOS button. So
Yeah, they're just so affordable at this point. It's hard not to justify carrying one if you're out in the woods quite a bit, and sometimes even not so much. I know I paid, I think, probably like 280 for mine, and I got a pretty good subscription with them just because I'm out so often. It's easier for me just to leave it, my subscription turned on, so I could just grab it whenever I want it. I have it in my pocket or in my bino harness out in the field. I always try to keep it on my person and not leave it in the tent or something. But yeah, the interest is, the subscription stuff. It's just so cheap versus not being able to communicate in the middle of an emergency.
oh, absolutely. I think they're well worth it. My kid wears one when he goes out snow machining. It lives with him everywhere he goes, and it makes me feel better to know he's got it. And I think they're, not to say too much about a plug, but I would recommend an inReach or a spot system to anybody that goes out in the woods.
So, kind of changing gears a little bit, but still talking about safety gear. What's your thoughts on the whole bear spray versus firearm debate? And you obviously mentioned that you do carry one or both sometimes.
Well, not really. I don't carry handgun or anything for bear protection. I just carry bear spray. But oftentimes I'll be out, like maybe with my airplane, and I've got a survival shotgun in the airplane, so it's there. And I didn't take bear spray because I don't carry bear spray in my airplane. I carry a shotgun. But I don't know. I I read through, is it Canute that writes those bear tail books, and I read through the back pages of that. It's just a list of all the different uh, recorded attacks in Alaska since, I don't know, whatever time he started picking them up, the 1800s, 1900s, whenever it started. And when you read through them, almost all of the cases where a firearm made a difference, it was a third party using it. It wasn't the person that was actually involved in the wrestling match. It was somebody else that had a gun that used it. And I know 2-3 people here in town who have used bear spray successfully multiple times. Now, I wasn't there, so I don't know how bad the bear, but if I'm just going to turn a bear around, that I'd rather not kill it. I don't really see any point in wasting life. But if it works as good as a gun, if you shoot them, you may just piss them off. They're going to be any better than that. And that gal, what, 3 years ago when that black bear got that biologist gal up north by Delta, and she had used bear spray on that bear, and it came back anyway.
Yeah, I know that last year there was a couple of guys pretty late in the season. I think they're actually during moose season, towards the end of moose season. Uh, uh, don't remember all the details, so for our listeners, don't crucify me here. But I think him and his buddy, I think they were out moose hunting and kind of came down the end of a dead end trail and were just going to turn around, And when they got to the end of the trail, I think one of the guys got sow with cubs again. I think the sow knocked him off the four-wheeler and started chewing on him, and his partner had to shoot the bear pretty much point blank range. And if I'm not mistaken, I think he had to actually shoot it twice, and one of them it was with a 30-06, so that's a lot more power than a lot of the people are carrying handguns, especially to be able to place an accurate round. And that bear was still going after the first round. Bears are definitely tough.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, when you think about how many times they shoot, what's that guy got shot? They were in the news. What, Chicago was it? I can't remember now, but they shot him like 7 times. Yes, ladies?
So I need to like stain my shirt and make it look really good.
Okay, well, I'm going to podcast right here, but when I'm done, I'll help you out. Give me 5 minutes. Working with the play, helping the kids with their costumes for our play. Anyway, just human beings can withstand more than one shot. 200 person, 200 pounds. Now you multiply that by 4. One bullet probably isn't going to stop an 800-pound guy. So.
Yeah, and be able, like you spoke to earlier, being able to use that firearm in half a second, if you are even able to get to it before the bear's on top of you, and be able to place a well-placed shot that will stop the bear.
Yeah, I think having it for, a situation where you see something approaching you from distance and you can prepare yourself, either way, something to make you feel better, if nothing else. But I think bear spray, it's all I carry. I believe in it. I read the stories. I look at the statistical data. They say it works. I believe it. But, I just don't want to take the bear and kill it if I don't need to. But, I just don't see any point in doing that.
Yeah, absolutely. I tell this all the time to people. I think one of the biggest deterrents for bear attacks a lot of the time is just being aware of where they're at, being aware of your surroundings. And I mean, obviously you can't let your guard down when you're out in Alaska, anywhere really, because you never know when that's going to happen.
Well, I now have bear bells on my dogs, and when I'm out backpacking, I have a bear bell that dangles around on the back of my backpack. And when I'm out with others, I communicate and I talk. And I always believe, and I still believe, that if you make noise, they're going to move away. If they hear you coming, they're not going to stay. They don't like people. So if you make your presence known, more than likely, I think that's why hunters run into as much of a trouble they do, because they're trying to sneak through the woods. They don't want to let anybody know they're there because they can't get to their prey if they do. And I think, but when you're just an outdoorsman walking around, I think you don't have much of an issue.
Yeah, I definitely think there's a correlation there. I know, being a hunter myself, a pretty avid one, and being a hunting guide, there's been often times where we've spooked bears by our noise and our smell unintentionally, far more than times where we've accidentally ran into them. But the times, the kind of close encounters, for a lack of a better term for it, that I have had is typically because we kind of bump into them trying to hunt, being hunters.
Right. You come around the corner and they come around the corner and you're nose to nose. That's usually what happens to me. Oh, sorry.
So I won't take up too much more of your time. But I ask all my guests, I kind of put them on the spot a little bit, so I apologize in advance here. But if you had to give a piece of advice to somebody that might be, if one of our listeners, if they're in a bear attack or thinking about bear safety, what kind of advice would you give those people?
Well, I think the 4 years I've been ruminating on it, I think the bit of information they don't tell you when they say play dead is that includes vocalization. I really believe that the attack on me came to an end because I stopped vocalizing. I stopped screaming into my phone and just making noise and decided I'm just going to grit my teeth and be quiet. So when they say play dead, they mean don't make any noise either, if you can help it. That would be my advice. And no one ever said that to me. Play dead. Okay, I curl up in a ball. Ow, that hurt. Well, don't do that.
Well, I appreciate it, and I appreciate your time and appreciate you joining us. I'll let you get back to it. But thanks for joining us and sharing your story.
Well, thank you for having me on. I really appreciate it. And good luck.
Thank you. Well, guys, that's another episode of the Alaska Outdoor Podcast. As always, you can join us on explorealaska.com or any of our podcast listening devices, and hopefully we'll catch you next time on the Alaska Outdoor Podcast.
I came from the mud. There's dirt on my hands. Strong like a tree. There's roots where I stand. Oh, I've been running from the law. Hope they won't shoot me down soon. They sing on a sleepless night. Try to catch me howling at the moon. Will you find me? Hope you find me.